welcome to my channel. So I'm going to speak about the law of attraction today. So I used to actually be a huge proponent for the law of attraction. I am one of those people that came into spirituality from a place of deep suffering, and I read the book The Secret, which is written by Rhonda Byrne, and it's really just a basic introduction to the law of attraction, which I didn't really know at the time that that's what it was. But when I read it, it seemed to have quite a profound effect on me. Now, I read this book at a time in my life when a lot of things were not going great for me. I was very unhappy, and so I was searching for happiness, I didn't have any contact with my family at the time. I didn't have any real friends. I had very little money. I just was not happy. And so I also, the kind of mindset that I had at the time was that life was just something that happened to me, that I had no control over it, and that I was just really at this mercy of the circumstances of my life. And I had a very strong victimhood mentality as well. So now, after I read this book and I discovered this law of attraction, things didn't just immediately change for me. First, what happened was I experienced a shift in my perspective, but what actually happened was, even though it was the start of pulling me out of a victimhood mentality, I actually found myself getting thrown deeper into a very physical experience of victimhood. So I was in a very abusive situation for a number of years, and it wasn't until I actually took the step to walk away from that situation that I found myself doing the more practical things of raising my vibration. So I was doing a lot of the very typical things that are taught by the law of attraction, which are, manifestation lists, visualization, and I was doing gratitude practices, things like that. And I did actually start to experience shifts in my life. I did. I wasn't actually trying to manifest any major things in my life. I wasn't one of those people like I wanted a huge amount of money or a spectacular career or anything. My main focus was on relationships, and I did stop attracting abusive relationships, abusive people into my life. So I found myself in a far better place in my life than what I had been. And I grew more and more passionate about the law of attraction because I started reading about it more. I started looking into the law of attraction more, and I got quite a deep understanding about it, And I was attending workshops on it. I met some like-minded people at the time as well. So it was a very positive thing for me. And I even considered at that time becoming a law of attraction coach. I thought, hey, you know what? This stuff works for me. Maybe it's something that I could get into and I could teach others, and then I could teach other people, how to manifest their desires, how to live more happier, fulfilling lives, right? But it didn't actually quite go down that route for me, and I'm glad actually that it didn't. So today, you will notice that the law of attraction teachings have really burst onto the new age scene, More and more people are teaching it. More and more people are interested in how to manifest their desires, how to live happier, more fulfilling lives. And, law of attraction is going to be very appealing to those people who come from a place of very deep suffering or some painful situation, or even just to those people that want that 10% of their life to just be different, right? Now, the law of attraction is taught as it's a universal law, a spiritual law. Is it? If it is, then we really need to know where it comes from, right? Where are its origins? especially when today we have so-called spiritual teachings that are really just a fragment that have been taken from ancient teachings, and sometimes they're taken out of context, okay, they're kind of amplified and they're turned into this whole separate thing and then marketed in such a way as to appeal to the type of person today that really desperately longs for happiness. And is it even okay to use spiritual teachings for material gain? Today, there is such an obsession, right, with manifesting desires. Who is even helping us to fulfill these desires? Is it the universe? Is it God? Are we separate from the universe? What if our desires really are just a way to pull us more deeper into situations that help us to learn more about our true self, our true nature? And our true nature isn't separate from God. It's not separate from the universe. Is the law of attraction really just the law of karma? Yeah, because as long as there is desire in us, there is birth. So does that mean that once we have, through lifetimes, exhausted all of our desires, does that mean we stop taking birth here? So what the law of attraction really ended up doing for me was it eventually led me down the path of helping me to go more inwards. So I started to turn more and more inwards. I started to become more interested in my internal world. And I would start asking myself questions like, okay, you know, why am I doing this thing? You know, why do I have this particular habit? Why do I want that thing? What is it that makes me think that having that thing is what's going to make me happy? And what part of me is it that actually wants that thing? Is it my small self, my ego, my personality? Is it my wounded self that wants that thing? Is it my heart that wants that thing? What part of me is it that actually wants this or that? That's the question that carries the potential to awakening you to your true nature, the part of you that actually doesn't care for the objects of this material world. And if we can learn to interface with the material world while being properly centered in our true self, then we'll realize that actually nothing in this world can make us happy, and nothing in this world can make us unhappy either. So some say that the law of attraction teachings are rooted in ancient spiritual texts, okay, like the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, Hermeticism. Let's take a look. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna warns that our desires for materialistic things actually don't ever bring us fulfillment, but instead pull us further away from experiencing bliss. That the soul has descended into the material plane, into the senses, and becomes identified with the physical body and the mind. The materialist man can become consumed by his senses and take action from his senses, but the wise man is said to have control over his senses and his mind and won't allow himself to be tempted by desire. The person is going to be ever watchful of desires that arise in him. He knows that true fulfillment comes from his relationship with God. And what about having more wholesome desires that might actually facilitate our spiritual growth? Are those okay to have? I would think so, right? Because they would be helping us to actually experience more of our true nature. You know, wanting to perhaps, for example, having the desire for good health can potentially help you to meditate better, right? Can help you to live a longer life so that you can do your spiritual work for longer. Wanting to experience more harmony in our relationships, wanting to perhaps deepen our relationship with our higher self. These are good, wholesome desires. What about the fact that the subtle is actually more important than the physical aspect of what we want, yeah? We have to think about really what it is that we really want. Do we even want the things that we think we want? Do we even want the car? Do we want the handbag? Do we want the relationship? Or is it that we are looking for more of the subtler aspects of those things? Yeah, that perhaps the soul is actually looking to fulfill. The law of attraction has also been compared to one of the 7 Hermetic spiritual laws, the law of cause and effect, which states that nothing happens by chance, that there is a cause for every effect and every effect has its cause. And in the Eastern mystery traditions of Hinduism and Buddhism, the karma is said to be one of the principles of the law of cause and effect. So does that mean that really the law of attraction is just the law of karma? We would really have to get a deeper understanding of what karma is then. And karma is such a huge, complex subject. I have read a book about it, which gives a very complex, very detailed explanation of what karma is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to get into karma in a huge way in this particular video, because I feel that I myself really need to deepen my understanding of what karma is, but we'll just touch on it lightly. So what is karma? So traditionally, right, people have had a tendency to think that karma is if we do a good deed, that good things will happen to us. If we do a bad thing, you know, we do bad things, then bad things will happen to us, yeah? That perhaps if in this lifetime, if I'm very good and I treat people very well, if I'm a very kind and generous person, that perhaps in the next life I'm going to be rewarded with, I don't know, lots of money, I'm going to be extremely wealthy, yeah? No, that's not what karma is. If you're kind and generous in this life, then it just means that in the next life you will also be kind and generous, because that is a tendency, a habit that you have, and maybe in the next life perhaps it's something you build upon and you become even more kind and generous, right? So karma is much more complex, okay, than what we think, and it is definitely not a punishment and reward system. So your karma is actually determined by your consistent habits, behaviors, and your tendencies. And so when it comes to karma, it has a lot to do with your individual perspective. So what you think is bad may not necessarily be bad, because you can't always know everything that there is to know about any situation. Karma has a lot to do with what we identify with as well. And from what I've learned, karma doesn't just result from a certain action that is taken, but also results from certain thoughts that are held in the mind and certain feelings that we have. And we really have to look at karma quite holistically actually as well, because it is lifetimes of information and memory that is held in the body and is held in the reincarnating aspect of our soul. Yeah. So our view of reality actually is tarnished by this memory. So we don't really even see reality as it is. So it's a very, very deep subject that maybe one day I may be able to talk about it more. So to conclude, I think that the law of attraction is really just a small kernel of the truth, but not the whole truth. I think that if we really want to learn about the nature of reality, it's better to learn from a spiritual system that is more reliable than the New Age material. There are a lot of people suffering in the world that want to find a way out of their suffering, and I think that sometimes if you have found your way into spirituality through the New Age and through law of attraction teachings, then you can eventually end up turning your back on it and think that it's just a load of crap, because it's not really the recommended route into spiritual development. Yeah, it worked for me, but I think the reason it's worked for me is because I have been willing to let go, to keep letting go of things, to keep kind of moving along, embracing more classical teachings when it comes to spirituality. And you know, it has had its challenges as well. Certainly has. It's just unfortunate, I think, that today there is certain parts of spirituality, of true spirituality, have just kind of been, you know, taken and used for personal agenda, and, you know, converted into huge businesses now. And a lot of it does prey on very vulnerable people. We've got to remember as well, we live in a very materialistic world. So our mind has got used to functioning in a very materialistic way, and we end up actually viewing a lot of spiritual teachings through that lens. So I think now more than ever, it's really important to get in touch with our hearts and to try and learn from our hearts. And, you know, it's important to unite the mind and the heart. I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to learn to do now. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much for listening. I really hope that the videos made some sense to you. Feel free to drop me any questions that you might want to have answered, and if you enjoy my videos, then please consider subscribing. Thank you. Bye.